Welcome to the Leverage Your Potential podcast. This podcast is hosted by the Director and Assistant Director of Menlo College's Office of Internships, Career Services, and Study Abroad, Dylan Houle and Kelly Davis, in partnership with Menlo's Content Creation Club.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Menlo College's Leverage Your Potential. I'm your host, Dylan Houle, the Director of the Internships, Career Services, and Study Abroad Office. And today we're joined by special guest, Matt Crevin, founder of TalkShop. Hi, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dylan. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. And I'm really excited for this conversation because I think you're going to have a lot of good advice for students who are dealing with an unprecedented summer in terms of how communication, which is your specialty, how communication can be leveraged in unique ways during this time for networking and setting yourself up for success when things do reopen. So let's get right into it, Matt. Can you tell me just a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and a little bit about your current project, TalkShop?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a Bay Area native myself, born and raised over in the East Bay. My parents are still in the same house that I was born and raised in, over in Orinda, for those that care or are keeping score at home. That's home turf for me. Been up in Seattle for 13 years now. And I think you asked, well, what is TalkShop or how did I get started here? I just want to make sure I heard you, Dylan, but I think that's what you'd asked.
That's right.
And in a nutshell, we'll get maybe into it a little bit more, but for just to context sake, TalkShop's the culmination of both my parenting journey as well as my professional journey. I mentioned I'm from the Bay Area. I finished up at San Jose State, went there all of 1 year, but that was a good 1 year because it led to my internship with the 49ers. That led to my full-time job with the 49ers. So it was kind of good timing to be where I was, if you will. But TalkShop's the culmination of things I've learned in professional sports, key lessons I've learned in the world of business with the companies that I've been able to work for and represent. And again, I mix that and match it with my personal parenting journey, which is obviously near and dear to me. And I bring all of those best lessons that I've learned into working with today's youth, both high school students and college students. So that's what TalkShop, or how I got here. And essentially what TalkShop is it's really developing the life skills, if you will, of how to have impactful face-to-face conversations. That's the super glossy, high-level overview, but I'm happy to go into that in a little more detail whenever you'd like.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to be getting into that through this conversation. And like I said at the beginning, super relevant to today's moment. Now, did you grow up being a 49ers fan? Was that like a dream job, or was it just any other team to you?
Dylan, you have asked a lightning rod question. Let me give you a quick story. I'll try to be quick, but the short answer is no, I did not. A little bit of a long answer just because I think maybe for your audience, they might get a chuckle. But when I was in there and I was interviewing, and I didn't know the job was going to be mine. This is just that season's intern. This is 1991-92. And they kind of looked at my resume and they said, oh, so I see that you went to Miramani High School over in the East Bay. Hey, look, not critical, but, what team do you root for? And I was at that moment, holy smokes, do I absolutely lie through my teeth, or do I just be genuine, authentic to myself and to them? Without asking you what you think I did, I just told myself, look, I grew up a Raider fan. Here's a scoop. I was born and raised in the East Bay. When I was a kid, they were perennial AFC title game participants, and that was just the center of the known sports universe, when I was 9 and 10. And they just kind of gave me a little nod. I know we're on podcast, but they just gave me a little nod and said, okay, that's cool. No, we appreciate you being honest. I actually got the job. And my first day in, I went to my little cubicle and I lifted up the phone. Yes, my old phone headset, back when those were a thing. And there was a picture of the Raider shield that they had cut out and put there. And I thought, you know what? That's pretty cool. So the 49ers just, I was endeared to them right away, but I didn't grow up as a Niner fan. Certainly, times have changed, but sorry, that was just a quick little funny story.
Oh, that's great. It goes to show that, some of those rivalries are just surface level. And when you get right down to it, right, everyone gets along and you can have some good relationships across the aisle or across the bay, if you will.
Yeah, you bet. No, for sure.
So you and I were introduced to each other through Angela Schmida, our Vice President for Student Success. And for our audience, just so they have some context about how we got connected, how did you get connected with Angela?
You know what? Yeah, hopefully there's some good lessons that college students and others can learn from. I didn't know Angela at all. I reached out to her in what's called basically just a cold call, although I reached out to her over LinkedIn, the business platform. But I reached out to her in a very clear, concise way and just said, look, I know I realize we don't know each other, but here's what I'm looking to do. I'd like to just share an exploratory conversation. Would you be open to that? And it was just kind of clear and cut and distinct like that. Is I told her who I was, what I was looking to do. And then I always end with a call to action. What is it I'm asking Angela? And that was the last line. Would you be open to a phone call at your convenience? I didn't know her at all. And she responded, and we're off to the races and just had a nice phone dialogue. And now you and I are chatting. So that's how I got to her. That's classic networking in my mind.
Absolutely. And I think there is a lesson to be learned there. An email, a LinkedIn request can go a long way, and you never really know where the ripple will end. So let's talk about your career journey. And you've had quite a career journey. As I reviewed your bio on TalkShop, you have been up to quite a bit. Just in summary, and hope you can go into some more detail, but you've played rugby internationally. You've written a book called Get in the Game. You've hosted a radio show. You've been the stadium announcer for the 49ers and for over 300 or close to 300 NFL games. Looking at your journey, I see that sports is definitely a through line. And we're on video chat. So for the audience, there's a ton of footballs behind Matt right now. And so I can tell sports is very important to you. Here at Menlo College, close to 45% of our students are student athletes, wrestling, baseball, basketball. Can you describe your own journey and why and how sports has been and continues to be an important part of your professional life, and how all those experiences inform TalkShop, your project today?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it's a loaded question all at the same time. But there are just, not to sound cliche, there are so many lessons that can come from sport, off the court, off the field, off the diamond, whatever your chosen sport is. There's so many lessons that come from that, whether it's a team sport or even an individual sport. For me, I've always been a team sport person. And you can't coach someone to have a high drive to want to win. You can't coach that, but there are other elements that you can coach. How do you partner well? How do you play well with your teammates? Translate that to the business world. Can you collaborate? Are you a team player in the business sense? So many lessons. And for me, I'm not going to misinform you. I love to win. Now, there's people that love to win at all costs. That's not the way I do it. I like to win, but I absolutely like to win doing it in what I call the right way. And that's what I teach. And those are the skills that I work with, college students when I work with them one-to-one on a career search process. Yeah, winning, the drive to want to win is great, but you want to make sure you keep your integrity and your moral compass going in the direction that's true to you, not just cheating or courting corners. There's lots of people, and we all know that's the lesson we teach 3-year-olds, cheaters never win. So I hope that makes sense. I don't want to stray from the question. Sports has been instrumental for me as a kid, just, growing up doing the Little League. And, I was an athlete in high school. I was an athlete in college, and I was an athlete after college. But for everyone, it stops. But for me, it's the friendships, and rugby is a classic example. It's now becoming way more mainstream than it was in the mid-'80s when I first started. And through the 93, 94 season, 95, actually, when I stopped, that sport has been just so wonderful to me, just not only in the sport itself and where I was able to take myself as an athlete, but also the lessons I learned, in traveling places I've never been to, different cultures. There's so many great things that can come from sports. I could probably take this, Dylan, off a complete dirt road right now, but I don't want to. Let me try to rein myself back in and get back to your question. But sports is definitely a through line for me, and I parent that way a lot of times. But at the same time, I don't want to be all about sports. I've got 2 boys, for example. One actually enjoys sports, and I love that he enjoys it. My younger son couldn't care less. He likes it, but it's not his thing. And I love that I've got 2 boys that are very different, and it keeps me in check that, I can't use sports analogies and cliches with one kid versus the other. And so I am in balance. I don't want it to sound like I'm a absolute, how do I say this nicely about myself, a sports knucklehead through and through, but it is a big part of what I do and what I continue to do, with my announcing job and my just pure love of sport.
And what advice would you give to current student athletes? One thing you said in there is eventually it stops. Everyone, reaches their peak, unless you, of course, go pro. What advice would you give to current student athletes, maybe student athletes who graduated this May and are entering this job market, or students that still have a few years left? What advice would you give them about leveraging and translating their athletic experiences to successfully transition into the workforce? How do you communicate those experiences on the field and on the court to the workplace? You touched on that a little bit, but maybe you can walk us through what some of the specific advice is that you actually give the students you work with.
Yeah, and that, again, boy, Dylan, you're paid the big bucks to ask these good questions. I tell you, there's a lot of skills that are just inherent in athletes, especially if they've gotten to the collegiate level at Menlo or other schools. They've already got the work ethic, as I call it, there to be successful, whatever it is that they're being asked to do, whatever their position is or their role. If it's a team sport, they've already, for the most part, kind of have that hardwired in them. If that's a fair comment to make, I think that's typically going to be the case. I think it's at this point, you just kind of transfer that same work ethic to, it's a series of habits, right? Repetitions. If you just use football as the analogy, you run the same routes. If you know that you're going to be responsible to understand and different downs and distance, you're going to have to understand what the 15 routes that you're going to be asked to run. And you do that by repetition, and that just becomes habit. It becomes second nature. Then you think less and you just react and you just be an athlete. You kind of look at that in the same way as I work with my, one-on-one coaching clients and just kind of design some different habits. But they've already got the advantage, if you will, because they're used to working towards a goal. They're used to working towards refining a habit. And TalkShop, in a way, the whole program as it stands, I view it as just changing some habits, some very key habits, but it's all about changing small habits that make a big difference. So I think working with student athletes is always a sweet spot for me because I was one, number one. And number two is I've got the real world experience that I draw from about what people are going to look for and what are some positive habits to get in the right mode to be able to do those, to transfer. So does that help? I'm not sure if I missed your question. I want to make sure I hit it.
No, that was right on the money. And I think being able to talk about those skills, I'm coachable, I'm dedicated, I'm able to refine a habit, to use your language. Being able to kind of communicate that is important. Let's talk about more broadly what you do at TalkShop. So I'm quoting you here from your website. You specialize in the lost art of face-to-face communications. And I think that's an interesting phrase, especially in our current time. But I want to ask you, why do you describe it as a lost art? What do you think has been lost that needs to be taught, that we are not doing intuitively or not doing by habit anymore? And how are you approaching giving this advice to people who are now only communicating through Zoom and through other video chat mediums?
Well, I think you answered also a few of them just on your own right there. Just by asking me the question, you kind of hit on a few things. But for me, I want to make sure that I'm really clear to you and your audience, more importantly, that TalkShop is not an anti-technology platform. That is absolutely not what I'm about as a person, and it's not what the program is about. Now, that being said, science backs me. It's not just what Matt Crevin, founder of TalkShop, is telling people. There's a lot of research out there, and it's ad nauseum that, look, technology is not going away anywhere. And you look at the high school kids, for example, if that's where they're starting with an iPhone or a device in their hand, that just perpetuates through college and through life. You and I both have them, I'm sure, and I won't speak for you, but technology can be an amazing, amazing tool. By the twitches of our thumbs, I can be in touch with you from 2 states away, and I can also be in touch with someone around the world. That's pretty powerful, and that's a great use of the tool. But it's also created this apprehension, if you will, around, holy smokes, I need to meet Dylan live. I need to have an internship interview with him. How can I have I'm not comfortable with having a face-to-face conversation with him. How do I sit still? How do I act comfortable? How do I give eye contact? And then all the while, oh yeah, I better say the right thing here. So I think through technology, I think it's created a high level of apprehension around having conversations. I'm talking about easy conversations, just, hi, my name is, if I'm in a social networking forum, if you will. Needless to say, a hard conversation. And this isn't a negative approach. That's not my style. That's not TalkShop's platform. But it is inevitable to use a hard conversation as an example, people would rather shoot out a quick tweet, send out a quick email, and think they're done with it. That's great, but you're not. It just typically doesn't work. We all know as adults that a lot of times intent, you just can't decipher certain elements from a text or a Snapchat or an Instagram post. You just can't. It's impossible. That's a one-way push. A conversation and the natural flow should be two-way. Let the opinions be sifted and sorted. Let the disagreements come out, but at least you can ultimately end up on the same page, even if you agree to disagree. But it's all about how do you have the conversation in an age with these kids, if you will, emerging adults, would rather just rely on technology to shoot a message. There are times where that will not work. There are times that you need to have the ability and the comfort and the confidence to be able to meet with someone, tell them who you are, what you're about, what the impact that you can bring, and do that with clarity and with confidence. So I hope that I'm hammering this point home. That's what this is all about.
Well, yes, you've made the point beautifully, and I can't help but think about how that could be applied, not just in professional communication, but communication more generally. And I think about, the unique political moment that we're in as well, and just the skill of communication and listening to the other side. And like you said, let the opinions be sifted and sorted. I just think that type of advice is so important right now.
Right. And I'll give you an example, Dylan. If I'm in a live workshop, meaning if I'm actually in the room, if I've showered and combed my hair and I'm actually there presenting live, or even if I'm doing them now, virtually over a webinar, it's just like what you and I are doing now. Your audience can't see, but we're on Zoom where we can see each other's faces. And I'm making a point to look at the camera versus looking at you. That's a subtle difference when you're interviewing or meeting with someone online. Look at the camera. That's the best we can do for eye contact. But when I'm actually live and I'm meeting with people, I always say, and it's very interactive, they're very collaborative sessions. I don't lecture people. I don't talk at them. I work with them. One of the many questions I asked them, I said, look, when's the last, anyone here this past week have sent, and this is kind of more towards high school students, college students as well. Anyone send a tweet or put an Instagram or put a social media post that just created some drama? And drama can be that someone didn't understand it, or, oh my God, did you see what John did? Anyone? Show of hands. Anyone ever had that happen this week? Inevitably, you get a few people look around the room and then more hands go up. And we get into, well, why is that? Why is that happening? And I simply get on the path that, look, a conversation needs to be two-way. Conversations are not monologue. It's so easy and it's so efficient with time just to shoot a text, send someone an email. But all you're doing is, number one, we're not even looking for grammar check. We're just sending it. And in a conversation, you can only control one element. The only way I can control what I'm doing right now is what I'm saying to you, Dylan. I can't control how you receive it. I can only control how I put it out. Point being is, if you're with someone face to face, you can get to a resolution, whatever the issue might be, or whatever the conversation topic might be. You will get to a resolution quicker, more efficiently than sending a string of 6 emails that go nowhere. Hope that, just using that as one example.
It reminds me of a example I've had in my head for a long time. It's not one I created, but I heard. How do you know you're funny if the person you're talking to laughs or chuckles?
Right.
And oftentimes you're moderating your conversation because of the real-time feedback that you're getting from the person you're talking with, which, to your point, you can't do through social media or through a text, because you're just telling the joke, but you really don't know if it's funny or not until maybe people comment or maybe it's dead silent. So I hear what you're saying. I think that's great advice and a great way to think about it.
And Dylan, can I just pick up on something real quick? And before I just get off this topic, because you just kind of led me right down a path that actually I incorporate all the time. I'm not a comic. I don't pretend to be a stand-up comic. I love humor and I like to find moments of levity. Absolutely. I think it can diffuse things at the right time. But I'm a big believer in the 3 laws of comedy, and that is know your audience, timing, and delivery. So that's, to your point, knowing who your audience is. If you're in an internship interview or a real interview, know who they are. And then, the timing of what you're saying. So maybe not an interview, but let's say you have to have a hard conversation with someone, and it's let's just use a relationship, or someone bothered you and they're continually doing something, but you need to have a hard conversation with someone. Is it the right time to have it when you know that that person might be distracted or they're going through something? So know the timing. Is it the right time? Or maybe it's best just to wait 24 hours. And then, of course, your delivery. So know your audience. Is it the right time to deliver it? And then what's the right way to deliver it? I'm all about delivering it face to face. So sorry, you just kind of mentioned the comedy and the funny thing. I'm a big believer in the three laws of being a good comic.
And they sound like just the 3 laws of common sense as well when it comes to
no doubt about it. No doubt about it.
Well, speaking of professional development, professional communication skills, Angela tipped me off that you have a good Joe Montana story to share somewhere along the line. I'm wondering if you could either share that or any other fun stories that you might have about your interactions with people in the NFL.
How much time you got? I'm fortunate and grateful that I've got a lot of stories to share. I think the one that I shared with Angela, and I do bring it up when it's the right time, and I have the right audience, and I have to deliver it the right way. But look, being thrust into an NFL locker room at that time, and again, it was the 1991-92 season. I was 8 years removed. I was on my parents' couch watching Montana Magic start. And for people that are wondering what that even means, just Google it. Just look, 1982 NFC Championship game. That's when the 49ers began their huge run. Here I am in the same locker room with him. My first year there was his last. So that's kind of a milestone moment for me. And just being in the same locker room with him, my head was on a swivel. You've got the Jerry Rices, the Joe Montanas, the Steve Youngs. You've got a who's who of soon-to-be Hall of Fame athletes. And here I am, just a college grad. I was a little shaken. I was a little nervous. And at the time, one of my bosses said, "Look, I need you to work with me, but we're going to together work with Joe tomorrow on his media obligations." And the blood must have come away, and I was all white, and I was obviously pretty nervous. And they said, "Look, if you can't handle this, we're going to have to ask you to walk out the door that you came in." And he said it with a twinkle in his eye, but he was also serious at the same time. He said, "Look, we hired you because you were comfortable and you were confident with yourself. This doesn't change. If you don't put yourself in a position where you are their equal now and you can partner with them, then you're going to get chewed up and you're going to get spit out." So it was just a key lesson of learning the ability, or to learn that skill set of having conversations with a wide variety of people in a wide variety of settings. Mine just happened to be in a super high pressure, environment of the NFL. Now that's a really, unusual environment. The NFL is just such a unique business, if you will. But it could be the same where if you're in a executive role or working with a company and you happen to the CEO happens to pop on the elevator. That could be a similar environment in the workspace, right? Or someone that oh my God, that's the guy that's been on TV, or I've seen him on a TEDx, whatever that situation. An NFL locker room is different, but there are similar settings, and it grounded me in that lesson. And I take that, and it's a cornerstone of TalkShop. The ability to communicate clearly and confidently with a wide variety of people about a wide variety of topics. So that was my welcome to the NFL moment.
I like that story. And I think even overcoming that kind of feeling of intimidation is what good communication skills gives you, is that confidence to know, doesn't matter who is in front of me, I'm going to be able to communicate effectively with them and kind of hold my own in this conversation. So thanks for sharing that. I want to go fast forward a little bit through to where you are today. You have 2 sons, and I liked what you said about them on your website, about them being your case studies for what works for this new generation in terms of communicating effectively. So for those listening who might have children of their own or younger siblings, what advice do you have for teaching foundational communication skills? And what do you think are some of the evergreen truths about communications that apply equally to an 8-year-old as to an 80-year-old and everyone in between?
To me, you can see this is not taking me a long time to think about it. It's listening. Pure, simple listening. And to kind of hammer or give you an example, when I'm in a TalkShop workshop, I said, hey, show of hands. I do show of hands a lot. I want to keep them awake. I want to keep them engaged. And they do a lot of talking themselves. But another example is, hey, look, show of hands. Who in here in this room likes to be understood? Simple question. You can see almost all the hands always go up because we all agree that we all want to be understood. And then I simply ask them, great, what do you think it takes to be understood? And if someone hits the nail on the head, and there's a lot of people that'll dance around that and come up with their ideas, and they're all great ideas. And if someone doesn't say listening, then I come out with that. I said, look, listening. So that's the common thread. As you mentioned, whether it's a 3-year-old or an 80-year-old, we all want to be understood. Being a parent will test your patience. Being in the corporate world with someone that just only wants to speak will test your patience the same way. Listening is hard. It's hard because it takes patience. We're in a very, our attention spans are just dwindling, literally by the day. So to hold someone's attention and to listen to someone to really understand them is not easy. And very few want to put the work in because it does require some work. And I always say, look, be careful, because if you listen to someone, you actually might learn something. I use that as a throwaway line, but it is dead true. So to me, it's, as a parent, if I'm putting my parent hat on, it's, I want to listen. I want to let them, I want their voice to be heard. Just as we all want to be understood, we all want our voices and ideas to be heard. But again, listening is hard because as parents or an adult or in college students, what we want to do typically is we just want to speak. Talking is the easy part. It's just repeating something we already know. Listening is the hard part because you have to be patient. You don't want to interrupt someone, but we all just want to do that. We want to get our thoughts, our opinions, our agenda out. And we're not really listening to others to really understand what they're saying. If you do, it's amazing the level of conversation. Not only you deepen the relationship with that person, whatever the setting might be, business or personal, listening. It's the common thread across the board. Sorry, that was a long answer, but I'm passionate about listening, and I wasn't good at it initially myself, and I realized the importance of it.
Absolutely. Seek first to understand and then to be understood.
Franklin Covey, right there. Bingo.
And I know that you spent some time working for Franklin Covey.
There's no doubt about it, and I don't claim that to be mine, but it is a lesson that is, I've seen firsthand. Prior to my Franklin Covey days, that hammered it home when I was there for sure. So that is, that's one of the great principles in the 7 habits, of course, but it rings true. If you just take a moment and listen, but people just tend to not want to do that. I can give another example, but, as part of in the sports world, we all can see people that watch sports programming. If there's a live interview happening, that man or woman conducting the interviews clearly has an idea of the questions you want to ask. But if a lot of times they'll miss a really great nugget if they just are only concerned about listening or asking that rather the next question opposed to listening to the answer that was just given. That might take you to a whole new level if you just listen. So just using that as a sports comment real quick.
Absolutely. Those sideline conversations and sideline interviews can sometimes be so revealing and sometimes so infuriating for their vagueness.
Exactly.
Love the basketball answers, got to stay together as a team and just go up and down the court and score more points than the other team. I'm like, well, what kind of insight is that?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So anyway, maybe that wasn't the right analogy, but the point being, if you just are only concerned with asking what you think the next best question should be, think of an interview. Maybe that's a better appropriate term. You think about you're in an interview, any candidate should go in and have a list of questions to ask because it should be a two-way conversation. But instead of just worrying about asking the 3 questions you have, listen to what the person's answering. It might open up a whole opportunity. So again, I'm saying the same thing, just using a different analogy, but listening to someone else during a conversation is, there's just no way that it cannot be beneficial for you.
And tell me what you think about this. In our interviewing preparatory workshops, we talk about this method called the QAQ, question, answer, question. And I advise the students, when you get a question in an interview, listen to that question, answer it, but then ask that question back in an inverted sense. So if they say something like, tell me, your view of yourself as a leader, or what are your top, leadership skills, or what is your leadership style? You answer that question and then you immediately ask them, what's the leadership style at this company, or what type of leadership qualities do you most value? And that comes from mirroring and matching not only of body language, but of conversation. What do you think about doing that in an interview? Many people save their questions for the end. What's your advice about how to get an interview to turn more into a conversation?
First of all, I will just give a complete 2 thumbs up on that. I absolutely agree with that. You're right. It needs to be a two-way conversation, but a lot of people, especially if they're younger on their tenure, they're just getting started in their career, maybe it's their first or second interview, may not feel they've got the right to ask or to go to the QAQ format? I personally say absolutely. It makes it more conversational, which is ideally what you want. I know this may be counterintuitive and you may hang up on me right now, but I'm a believer that they're not going to hire the resume. They're going to hire the person. And if you can show them that you're human and show that, human touch, if you will, by asking a question, and don't be concerned, oh, maybe I shouldn't ask. I just want to let that person in an interview. It should only be that person asks a question on that side of the table. Absolutely not. I completely agree with you. And I think that's a great, not only does it show that you're prepared and that you have questions, but that you're okay and comfortable to have a conversation with this person. So absolutely.
Yeah, thanks for weighing in on that. I always found that to be good advice, and I think the students that do employ it tend to have good results. Well, we're coming towards the end of the conversation. We like to ask every guest, what is something that you are reading, watching, or listening to right now that's inspiring you, or that you would like to recommend to our audience?
Ooh, the Denny's menu online because it's got pictures. All right. I told you I'd come out with some bad humor, and that was it.
That was it.
Right now, I wouldn't consider myself a voracious reader, but I do like to read. Sometimes it just helps me unwind. Alan Alda. The audience may not know Alan Alda in terms of the person, but is a book, and I have a visual. Actually, we're on podcast. You can't see the visual, but I have it here for you to see in case you're curious. Just if you by visual, but it's quite interesting, and it speaks to me in terms of what I do. But if I understood you, when I have this look on my face, that's the name of the book. And it's all about his adventures in the art and science of relating and communicating with others. So that's the book. Again, it's Alan Alda. If I understood you, would I really have this look on my face? Really, really fun stuff. And it's lighthearted, but yet the messages are quite significant. It was my airplane book, and now I'm coming back to it.
Got it. Well, thank you for that recommendation, Matt, and thank you for a great conversation. I know that our listeners are going to get a lot out of this, and hopefully they'll be able to follow up with you at TalkShop. Would you like to just pitch how they can get connected with you if they're interested?
Absolutely. The best place is the website. It's a unique URL, so I'll say it twice, but it's talkshop.company, not .com. So it's talk, TALK, shop, SHOP, .company. Anyone that goes to the site, if they want to, there's a what does it call it? 10 ways you can change your communication skills right now. It's just like a free download. Move past that. If you want it, great. It's not a must have, but simple, just get your email and you can get that document. But on the site is all my contact information. Matt Crevin is the name. You can see the LinkedIn connection. However you'd like to connect. I'm always open and always excited to talk with college students, but they need to take the initiative and reach out, and I will absolutely reach back.
Thank you, Matt. And for our audience, you have listened to another wonderful episode of Leverage Your Potential, hosted by Menlo College. And our guest today was Matt Crevin. You can listen to our other episodes by finding us on Spotify or anywhere else podcasts are found. You can also visit our blog, blog.menlo.edu/career-services. Thank you all very much and have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Leverage Your Potential podcast. Episodes are posted weekly and can be found on our blog at blog.menlo.edu/career-services/. Make it a great day.